afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another unforgettable hour of the Red Cross Roll Call. Yours because this program is dedicated to the Red Cross and launching another roll call across America and all the things that the people did. With the words that were said nearly 60 years ago by a newsman, Gabriel Heater, regularly opened his program with this, saying the Red Cross Roll Call. And he'd also follow it with a line that he used, and I want to get it right, so I'm going to read it. Aha, there's great news tonight. But in 1941, if you remember, the Americans entered the war late in that year. And so we'll use this time to take a look at some of the things that we did as the war raged on all the oceans around the world. So today, there's three of us here from the Red Cross. We're all volunteers. We have Kay and Chuck Kinsbury, and they're going to tell you some of their stories of how the Red Cross helped them. And I'm also a volunteer with them, and I have to admit, I don't remember 1941, but I'm going to try to live that year with you as well. So step back into those years. This is the Red Cross Roll Call. It talks about the people that gave sacrifices here at home and those who gave them around the world. The sailors, the soldiers who fought, and maybe they knew one another. Maybe they're people you knew, and maybe they're not. So this is about the memorial years. This is a great veterans program. It's a great program to think about what we gave in the past. So some of the things the Red Cross did. We had a motor corps. These were, for lack of better words, the Greyhound buses, the yellow cabs of the day. They do all the things that the people needed. They take them to where they needed to go when they came home and treated the veterans. And it was made up mainly of women who volunteered. It could be tinkering with cars, fixing tires that broke down, and it could be just taking them where they needed to go, whether it was to a train or to a bus to get home or to get to their deployment site. And on the front, there was, like I said, mainly women who did it. Not a job that was well known back then. Women didn't open engines of cars and do things, but yet they were dedicated to making those vehicles run. And there was hundreds of them. Station wagons, ambulances, canteens, limousines, trucks, all the things that were needed to move people and organizations around the world. Another great organization that they had, oh sorry, we skipped a few pictures here, was the Red Cross nurses. At the break of the war, it was challenging to fill the positions, both in civilian hospitals and in the military. And the Red Cross was used to recruit for the Army and the Navy medics, for the nurses. There were more than 110,000 women who were recruited to become volunteer nurses during the war to help the civilian population that had to address all the things that happen at home on a regular basis, but do it while the majority of nurses were deployed in the military. So there were challenges for them. And here they are getting their pins. Of course, they were critical to something that started during the war. We all think of the Red Cross as being a blood donation company, and that's one of the things they do is collect blood donations. At the beginning of the war, there were about 20,000 units of blood out there. And by January 2014, the weekly donations had gone up to about 5,000 units from 1,000. So a very large increase. During the week of D-Day, 1944, a record 123,000 pints of blood were collected. And it was done by volunteers with the Red Cross. Born in the battlefields of World War II, the American Red Cross blood donation has grown to become one of the world's safest and most reliable blood donation companies in the world. And many people rely on it today. About 50% of all blood used in the hospitals today are done by the Red Cross. And here's some of the roles they filled out. That's the pin that was given to all the volunteer nurses. Why aren't we moving? Much of the work that was done by this group wasn't as glamorous as the Andrews Sisters and singing and dancing and entertaining the troops, but that went on for many years. A lot of it had to do with administrative tasks that we did. Things like typing, filing, keeping track of records. And we'll talk a little later on about some of the other things they do in communication, facilitating communication. So it wasn't a great glamour job, but it did have a lot of key things to it. And this is a staff assistance crew that we talked about and all the things that they got to do. They organized all the things that we did. And here's this quote that I'd like to read. And again, I'm going to do this. It was from January 25th, 1952, and it was a town crier broadcast over CBS. In the months that lie ahead, the bodies of many Americans will carpet the floors of the 7 seas, or be left behind in the battlefields we cannot ever name. The rest of us must do what we can and never, never squat. It is in this war that you have to give up every comfort you've grown used to. If taxes take every penny you own, yes, it is. If your house is blown to the bits in a raid, well, let's permit and inquire what of it. Not everyone can get in the armed forces, but I think today that this country swarms with the men and women who are aching to help. Each asks a single question: what can I do? And there's just one question to that: do your very best. And that was kind of a message that went throughout the war. The staff assistants typically went above and beyond. For example, during things like blackouts, they would stay at their stations and make sure communication continued.
During World War II, Red Cross field directors provided that vital link between the American fighting men and those on the home front. Whatever need the soldier or sailor had, they could come to the Red Cross for help. And the field directors lived and worked with the soldiers in foxholes, aboard troop carriers, and were in advanced positions. On the screen is a Red Cross field director preparing to bail out with Army paratroopers during maneuvers at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And the field directors relied on the Red Cross chapters at home to contact families of military personnel who were in need of assistance. That shows them getting ready to bail out. And Red Cross workers were no strangers to danger. During the war, 82 Red Cross workers were decorated, including 3 who were given the Silver Star for gallantry in action. And one of these was awarded posthumously to Richard M. Day of Missouri. He was a Red Cross correspondent, was on board a landing craft during an invasion in the South Pacific. And when the Navy coxswain was killed by enemy fire, Day took control of the vessel and steered it safely to shore before machine gun fire killed him too. Were it not for Day's heroic efforts, the losses would have been devastating. Unlike their female counterparts, men who volunteered with the Red Cross did not have Red Cross uniforms to wear. See, I'm wearing a jacket of one of the jackets they used to wear. They wore an officer's uniform of the branch of service to which they were assigned, with Red Cross insignia replacing the military insignia. Although without rank, all Red Cross volunteers serving overseas were given the honorary rank of captain so that they would receive additional protections under the Geneva Conventions if taken prisoner by hostile forces. My mother was a Grey Lady. She received a certificate from the American Red Cross, and this is the certificate that she received, and it certifies that Mrs. Ray Barker has accomplished the prescribed course for Grey Lady service conducted by the Newport chapter, and that's Newport, Rhode Island, of the American National Red Cross. And this was issued from Washington, D.C. And it was in 1963 that she received this. So it's got the Red Cross volunteer symbol, and then this is her card that she received saying that she was. So the Grey Ladies were without a doubt the sweethearts of the Red Cross. Their war record was impressive to say the least. Millions and millions of hours of service in civilian and federal hospitals across the country. I don't think any other Red Cross worker touched the lives of our fighting men than those gallant Grey Ladies. They always seemed so relaxed, so calm, no matter what the situation. That was their role. To the injured soldiers, they were companion, social worker, mother, and sister. And their job was to comfort soldiers. It was not a meaningless task either. These women were working hard to see to it our fighting men were back on their feet in no time. Here are a few helps for you on the job as printed in a 1941 Gray Lady manual. In your volunteer service, you personify Red Cross. Your manner, your understanding will be the standard by which others judge Red Cross. You are the Red Cross. Listen and learn. Frequently, you can help most by being an interested listener. Keep confidences and make no promises that you are not reasonably sure you can fulfill. Appear in hurry when you are the busiest. Work calmly when you have fears. A collect manner can create a calm, secure feeling in others. Be judiciously impersonal without losing your sensitivity to the feelings of others. And Gray Ladies could never accept a tip for all the work that they did. And one of the soldiers wrote this: "Dear folks, they tell me it won't be long now before I'll be writing my own letters. Though that hardly seems possible, it is amazing what can be accomplished with these new mechanical hands of mine. I hope I'm not completely spoiled before it is no longer necessary to call on one of these smiling, patient Red Cross Gray Ladies for every little whim. You think I was the favorite son of 50 mothers. They don't give you a chance to feel sorry for yourself. I never thought I would place so high a price on willingness and agreeableness. And there isn't any request we make which they don't interpret as a command. For instance, one fellow here wanted an oyster stew made just a certain way. A Gray Lady went out and bought 2 dozen oysters and a pint of cream. To be sure, he got it from the hospital kitchen. The buddy in Italy of another patient here wrote that he had a special hunger for tuna fish. A Gray Lady collected red points from her neighbors and bought 12 pounds in cans, all that the overseas mailing restrictions would allow, and she shipped them to him. I could give you countless other illustrations which would help you to realize what rare, bountiful creatures these Gray Ladies are. They are the eyes, ears, hands, and legs of all of us."
Another thing that the military covered was the POWs. We don't always think about that, but even to this day, one of the roles of the Red Cross Mills was to help the prisoners of war. Hollow, unshaven faces, fevered, staring eyes. Life behind barbed wires in the prison camps was a constant misery for American men. Brutal enemy guards stared as they starved, silenced them when they complained. Hearts at home wept, but more was done than weeping. Hands got busy, were given to the prisoners of war to help make their time in prison a little bit better. From the words of a soldier, an American prisoner, described the difference between life and death. In the horror camps of Europe, he would frequently say, "We got these packages, and they kept us alive for the next month." This shows some of the words on the factory floors as they were putting together the things on this land that were needed to fight those wars overseas. They were jammed into factory floors and asked to do things that traditionally would not have been asked of them. Thousands of Red Cross volunteers stood on assembly lines and packaged pieces, put things together. The work the volunteers did during the war was tedious, but it was something that had to be done, something that was needed in order to meet the demands overseas. And these packages were then shipped to the prisoners of war on a regular basis, hoping that they would get in the hands of the soldiers being held against their will. Many of them did, unfortunately not all. One of the other things that was done during the war was the canteen services. The Red Cross throughout the world, when they go in, will help the local people, the merchants, the guards, and the soldiers of the war. About midnight, when the winds were howling and time was really appreciated, a big cup of coffee or hot chocolate, sandwiches and cookies, or a steaming bowl of soup. Who was standing there but the Red Cross Mobile Canteen Corps? And they got it there every day, every week, and every holiday. I don't know if anyone's seen it, but they do actually have canteen services today that they did bring out during some of our local items. But Those all came out, those were refined during the war. That was when they, even though they existed, they got better at it because of the large quantities they had to do it. The next section we have is on the production floor. Sorry, got ahead of ourselves here. Patient unvarying colorless toil takes it only by the women who were instructed to make things happen. The legion of workers, rich and poor, young and old, and all races. There were 40,000 of them performing the volunteer services at home that kept the war going, that kept the production going. Production, yes, carloads of it. In terms of units off the assembly lines, no other Red Cross service presents such spectacular figures. Surgical dressings, for example, 2.5 billion of them handled during the war. They also produced nearly 16 billion what they called dirty bags containing comfort items for soldiers and refugees. And thousands of letters and items were shipped through this organization to help the suffering people around the world. Production Corps wore the basic white volunteer service uniform, and the dark blue trim signified their unit.
Greetings. The enclosed photo will be meaningless to you and deserves a few lines of explanation and gratitude. 50 years ago, I reported aboard the USS Boise when the Admiral of the Islands off the coast of New Guinea. Shortly after, I was somehow given this Afghan, and with a small label in one corner, Southeast Pennsylvania Chapter American Red Cross. I guarded it carefully and on cool nights used it as a cover. When we were occasionally in friendly waters, we slept on the deck, and the Afghan always served as a bag and cover. With the war's end, I was transferred to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. The Afghan went along, and in ensuing years it has been used to cover my napping children and became a family fixture with several Apaches. Last year, I retired from being an art history professor for 43 years. I am fortunate to have a little house in the timber along the Iowa River where I spend much time. The Afghan continues to be my companion in my afternoon naps. The photo was taken there. After 50 years, I thought it perhaps time that I said thank you. Sincerely, Lawrenceville's Pella.
These are some slides that you may remember or may have seen pictures of. So we have presented to you some episodes, some pieces of information of what it was like for the Red Cross during the war years. It didn't start and finish there. It started before and still goes on today. During the war, loyalty sacrificing more than 7.5 million volunteers in this country, 40,000 staff members to serve the American Red Cross Day. It was never possible to determine the full human measure or the help that was given by the Red Cross during the war. And with that, we'll share some stories. I know Kay and Chuck, when we wrap up, will give you a few pieces of information on some of their experiences with the Red Cross. So 60 years ago, the need was real. The world was at war, and the American Red Cross stepped up to help. You too, as members of the community, or the members of the community at the time, stepped up as well. Together they sacrificed. Today, we're still there. We still need the help, and we're still fighting wars around the world. The American Red Cross is still there to help. But today, the battlefields may seem a little less dominating where they're halfway around the world, but they do exist. And here in this country, we deal with things such as Mississippi flooding, young people threatened by drugs, fires, natural disasters, and as we all saw this week, there's been a rather major typhoon go through the Philippines. Each day, the American Red Cross steps up to help people in need, both at home and around the country. We're still here, we're still helping, and every day we want to help you. We ask that you help as you can.
And I was the youngest with my banana girls. And so my mother bought us all pea coats and sailor hats.